Sophia stood by the kitchen sink, her fingers lightly grazing the countertop as she watched the plumber work under the cabinet. His broad shoulders and steady hands were captivating, and every time he leaned back to reach for a tool, her pulse quickened. She told herself it was innocent, a fleeting attraction, but the tension in the room was undeniable. When he stood up to check the water flow, their eyes met. His dark, confident gaze lingered a moment too long. "Is everything working now?" she asked, her voice softer than intended. He nodded, stepping closer. "Should be fine. But if anything else comes up, I'm just a call away." Her heart pounded as the space between them seemed to shrink. Before she could think, his hand brushed hers on the edge of the sink. She didn't pull away. Instead, she looked up at him, her breath catching when he leaned in slightly. "I shouldn't," he murmured, but his voice lacked conviction. "Neither should I," she whispered, but her lips were already grazing his. The kiss started gentle, exploratory, but quickly turned heated. His hands cupped her face, pulling her closer, while hers found their way to his shoulders, clinging to him as if to keep herself grounded. The smell of metal and soap lingered on his skin, intoxicating and raw. He lifted her effortlessly onto the countertop, his lips trailing down her neck. She gasped, her fingers tangling in his hair, pulling him closer as his kisses grew more urgent. Every brush of his lips, every touch of his hands ignited a fire in her she hadn't felt in years. "We can't do this here," she murmured between kisses, though she made no move to stop him. "Where, then?" he asked, his voice husky as he kissed along her jawline. She hesitated for a moment before nodding toward the door that led to the backyard. He grabbed her hand, pulling her with him. The cool evening air did little to dampen the heat between them as he guided her to the shed, tucked away in the corner of the yard. Inside, the dim light added to the intimacy. He pinned her gently against the wall, his hands roaming her body, memorizing every curve. She gasped again when his lips found hers, her resolve completely crumbling. For a moment, all thoughts of her husband, her responsibilities, and the consequences vanished. All that existed was the undeniable chemistry between her and the man who had entered her life to fix a simple leak, only to shatter the delicate balance of her world. The sound of a car door slamming in the distance brought them both back to reality. Sophia froze, her chest heaving as they pulled apart. "I have to go," she whispered, but her fingers lingered on his shirt. He nodded, his eyes filled with a mix of longing and regret. "Call me if you need anything else." She gave him a small smile before slipping out of the shed, her heart racing as she made her way back inside, trying to suppress the guilt and thrill that warred within her. Sophia closed the door behind her, leaning against it to catch her breath. The house felt eerily silent, the distant hum of the dishwasher her only companion. She ran her fingers through her hair, still tingling from his touch. The weight of what she'd just done began to settle in. But rather than regret, she felt an inexplicable pull to see him again. The next day, as she went about her routine, the memory of his touch lingered. Her husband, Daniel, seemed oblivious as he sipped his coffee and scanned his emails at the breakfast table. He was always busy, always preoccupied, and Sophia wondered if he even noticed her anymore. The doorbell rang mid-morning, breaking her reverie. Her heart leapt when she saw it was him. "Morning," he said, holding up his toolbox. "I forgot to check the pressure valve yesterday. Just thought I'd swing by to make sure everything's good." Sophia knew better. There was no reason for him to return unless he wanted to see her. She stepped aside, her pulse quickening. "Daniel's at work," she said softly, her words hanging in the air. His lips curved into a knowing smile as he stepped inside. "Good." This time, there was no hesitation. The moment the door clicked shut, he pulled her into his arms, his lips capturing hers in a kiss that reignited the passion they'd shared. She melted into him, her hands exploring the familiar strength of his body. "I can't stop thinking about you," he murmured against her ear, his voice low and rough. "Me neither," she admitted, her voice trembling. He guided her to the couch, their movements fueled by an urgency neither could resist. Her hands fumbled with the buttons of his shirt as his lips traced a path along her collarbone, leaving her breathless. Every touch, every kiss, felt like an escape from the monotony of her life. They spent the next hour tangled together, losing themselves in each other. It wasn't until his phone buzzed with a reminder of another appointment that they reluctantly parted. "I'll be back tomorrow," he said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Sophia nodded, biting her lip to suppress a smile. "Be careful." For the next few weeks, his visits became a regular occurrence. He always had an excuse, a leaky pipe, a loose fixture, but they both knew the truth. They stole moments whenever they could, their affair hidden in the quiet corners of her home. But the secrecy couldn't last forever. One evening, as Sophia sat on the couch scrolling through her phone, Daniel walked in earlier than expected. "Hey," he said, loosening his tie. Why was the plumber's van outside again? Didn't he fix everything already? Sophia's heart skipped a beat. Oh, there was another issue with the bathroom faucet. He just left. Daniel frowned, his eyes narrowing. "You've been calling him a lot lately. Is everything okay?" "Of course," she said quickly, forcing a smile. "I just want to make sure everything's in perfect condition." But Daniel wasn't convinced. Over the next few days, he grew more watchful, his questions more probing. Sophia began to feel the walls closing in. The breaking point came on a Friday evening. Sophia had arranged for the plumber to stop by while Daniel was supposed to be at a work dinner. They were in the kitchen, their laughter and whispered promises filling the air, when the front door slammed. Daniel stood in the doorway, his eyes cold and calculating as he took in the scene. "Well," he said, his voice like ice, "looks like the faucet isn't the only thing getting fixed around here." Sophia froze, guilt and panic flooding her. The plumber took a step back, his hands raised in a gesture of surrender. "Daniel," Sophia started, but he cut her off. "Save it," he snapped. "You think I haven't noticed? The sudden calls, the way you've been acting." Sophia's throat tightened as Daniel's words lashed out, each one a dagger to her already fragile composure. "Get out of my house," Daniel said, turning to the plumber. "Now." Without a word, the plumber grabbed his toolbox and left, casting Sophia one last glance before the door shut behind him. "You've got some explaining to do," Daniel said, his voice low and dangerous. Sophia's mind raced as she tried to find the words, but deep down, she knew the damage was done. There was no going back.